and then with that, I think it was a Challenger that exploded. I remember that, like the television being brought out, and we were little kids, and we were sitting there watching. She's all like, "Oh, watch the spaceship go to the moon," and then out of nowhere it explodes. And then she's like, "Oh, you weren't supposed to see that." And then she like turned it all off, and then we were forced to sit there, but we didn't really understand. We were too little to understand the concept of what happened. But yeah, it exploded. What I do remember mainly in my late 20s, early 30s was 9/11. I'm part of that crew. Um, I remember waking up and seeing the planes going to the building. I remember all the message that was putting out into media about who they thought it was, and talking about Muslims and Arabic.
I remember all that
Yeah,
too.
and they were just like pushing that agenda. I remember there was a lot of hate crimes after that. Um,
Was that before or after the war? That was before the war, huh?
what war?
Wasn't there like a war that Bush
Yeah,
started?
there's been a couple wars. I think. Well, that's if you're talking about the same one. I can't remember what it was called, but that right there,
Pretty recent.
it pushed that to happen. So I think it was the Iraq War.
Oh, okay.
So they use that, and when I say they, I mean the government used that to promote, not promote, to, it's called propaganda, right? They go out there and they blame a certain people for doing certain things, even if they don't do it, so that way they can get the backing to go to that country and start a war.
Oh, yeah.
And then it came out that it was all crap. It was not even true. And they didn't even have nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do with them.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of people that think that 9/11 is a setup. Like it was not never anything that has to do with people from the Middle East. It was an inside job. There's just a lot of things. So like mass media has played a big role in my upbringing, in my early
Right.
20s, 30s, because we didn't know what we do now. And so seeing a lot of stuff coming up on TV, like these people are basically, don't trust them. If they wear anything on their heads or they do this or that, then they can't be trusted. Like all that was all lies. It's all been lies.
Yeah, I remember a comedy show where they brought up that and yeah, it was like in the later like times though, like after all that had happened. It's kind of to make light of the situation.
Yeah, you can't make light of it. Look at all those people that died.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I remember like even I lived in South Central at that time, and I remember like there was always gang activity there, always shootings every day, every day. I lived in a very bad part of South Central. I lived off of Hoover and Manchester, and I remember after that happening, like there was no airplanes in the air for like a few days. There was no type of movement, right?
Wow.
And like the schools and stuff were closed, and then like there was no shootings, there was no nothing. And then like after like the third or fourth day, then all that activity started picking up again. It was like, oh, they're not coming to invade us, so we're gonna go ahead and shoot each other.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I remember being scared of that too. Like, oh, is my cousin gonna get drafted? But like then after that, like they kind of like he actually went into when he turned 18. He went into the
Military.
Yeah, he wanted to. And yeah, because when I was a kid, like it was about like riding bikes and things like that, you know. And my older cousins were like, and like it was wild. Even like recently before COVID, like I went to LA or something, and I just stepped out of the car and it was just so loud. Like the city is just like really loud. There was somebody dressed in like the Purge costume because it was around Halloween, and I felt like kind of like fear yet excitement yet like, you know, like, oh, it's kind of dangerous out here, like.
Yeah, and now that you mention that, also too, what you didn't see in my generation is a bunch of homeless people. Like you would see one homeless person every so often walking around, but the majority of homeless people that you see now did not exist. It did not happen. I know in downtown LA, there was Skid Row. The Skid Row was very localized. It was just in a certain section, and it was not all over. Where now you can go in any part of LA into any city, and you see homeless everywhere. Like that was not happening when I was in my 20s and 30s, not even in my 40s. This is like a new phenomenon, like over the last 5, maybe 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gotten so out of control. Like it's so out of control.
Why do you think that is? It like, I think it's either the drugs or it's like just people just don't care anymore.
No, it's because gentrification. Gentrification it has a big part of it. So meaning that those areas where people were able to afford rent, like in the lower class sections where it's like poverty, like in certain parts of LA, the rent was very cheap there, right?
Yeah.
You're able to get a 1 bedroom for like $500. And what they did is gentrification happened, so it's predominantly white people in a certain class, economic bracket. You know, they come in and they start buying these properties for a really expensive price, right? And then they resell them for even more money, and it's pushing out the poor people or the people that were barely making it, and it's being how do you say, like it's being sold to a certain class of people, which is not us, right? It's not me, it's not the average day person, it's people who have money. And so what happens is that area now no longer is it's no longer for the poor, it's for the rich, right? But the poor, I think that they thought the poor would just go away, but all the poor did was just go outside.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You push them out of their house and their community, and they don't have nowhere to go. If they were poor to begin with, where did you think they were going to move to? Well, all they did was just go outside. They just went outside, popped a tent, and said, well, this is where I'm going to be because I can't be nowhere else anymore. Because you've made the economy so bad that we can no longer come up with the deposit for a house. We can no longer afford rent because rent went from $500 to $15, $17, $2,000, $2,500, or $3,000 for a little single. You know what I'm saying? They push that price so that way it's driving off the poor.
Yeah, I tried to vote for that rent control bill.
Yeah, so did I. And it's so funny how it didn't pass, but it seems like a lot of people wanted it. So to me, I don't believe it. I think that they did something to that election. Yeah.
Yeah, they did something to it, right? Yeah, I always think that it's always the higher ups that like make a decision, and like, you know, when the government people
Yeah.
that make a decision in the end. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for your time. I think that's almost, well, we got like one more minute.
Okay.
What did you do for fun? Fun, like.
When I was little, I used to ride bikes, ride skateboards. Me and my brother were everywhere. We didn't have like the curfew. It was still always 10 o'clock, but we came in when the lights were going down. We were like we were at the park. We were we used to even go to the beach by ourselves, like.
Oh, wow.
And then neighborhood kids. It's not like it is now. Now if your kid is
At the beach,
10, 11 years old and they're at the beach, like somebody's going to jail. Like,
oh wow.
Yeah. And now, back then, it would just be me and my brother and a few of our friends, and we would just go all the way from where I lived, and we would either take our bike. Sometimes we would catch the bus. Sometimes our parents would drop us off there, and we would figure out a way back, which wasn't very safe. But we explored. We were everywhere, right? Like, it's not like it is now. You drive around and you don't see kids really outside every so often, maybe, but
yeah, they're a lot of trouble. Like usually you expect them to be like troublemakers now, like, because like even me, like I would go to the beach with my friend on the bus or something, and like we would get lost or something on the way back, or like end up like, you know, different buses or whatever. and my dad would literally get so mad. He'd be like, "Why are you not at home? Don't you have homework?" Like, you know,
Yeah.
like it wasn't okay for us to be doing that kind of stuff, even in junior high. You know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was everywhere in junior high. By the time junior high came around, I thought I knew all of California.
That's good. It sounds like the war and the trouble and all that was like a little bit
different place.
more different, and then. Like,
But the actual trouble itself has always been the same, right?
Right.
So you come across those people that will rob you, or you would come across people that will randomly assault you, right?
Yeah.
But it was not, it's not like it is now. So I don't know if it's that the media pushes it so much that it scares people into not doing anything,
Oh, yeah.
but because
That
the
could
same
be it.
crime was still happening. The crime still happens the same way. It
Mm-hmm.
still happens. If you were shoplifting back then, you're still shoplifting now. Like it's just different generations, right?
Yeah.
But it's what our media pushes for us to believe, so that way they can keep filling up prisons. That way they can keep
Did
filling
you
up
know that
jails.
Orange County is making a new prison?
Oh,
I saw
wow.
it on Instagram, like somebody on the news posted it, and somebody posted it to Instagram. It's I gotta look into it, but I'm pretty sure that, and I'm like, no, you know.
That's
But like that also tells me like I gotta be better, like, cause now they'll put anybody in jail for any little crime.
and they do, especially in Orange County.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem. Have